Five. Yes. Good evening, distinguished guests, esteemed researchers and colleagues. On behalf of Bitlisaniyat International Academy, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to our scientific lecture this evening. I would like to start by expressing our heartfelt gratitude to our speaker, who has joined us today from Colombia to share her valuable insights and research findings. I welcome also Professor Abdulsalam Talib, who is today with us as a reporter for this lecture. I also extend my sincere appreciation to our supervisors and support team for their support and collaboration in facilitating this event or this series of events. Additionally, I wish to acknowledge our coordination and technical assistance team for their contribution. So this evening we delve into a topic of presenting relevance to language education worldwide, one that challenges dominant paradigms and centers voices often marginalized academic discourse. Our lecture is titled Rethinking Language Teacher Education from the Global South, Situated Curriculum, Teacher Agency, and Context-Responsive Assessment. In an era of increasing standardization and globalized educational models, the unique socio-cultural, institutional, and linguistic realities of local teaching contexts are frequently overlooked. Teachers' education programs, particularly in the Global South, often find themselves implementing curricula and assessment framework designed into distant academic centers, frameworks that may bear little relevance to daily lives and challenges of teachers and their students. Our speaker tonight invites us to imagine a different path, one that begins with place, with agency, and with a commitment to epistemic diversity. We are privileged to have Dr. Angélica María Rojas-Isaza as our speaker this evening. Dr. Angélica is a language teacher, educator, and researcher working in public universities in southern Colombia. Her work focuses on language teacher education from global South perspectives, with particular interests in situated curriculum design, teacher agency, and context-responsive assessment practices. She has specialized in teaching research methods and monitoring undergraduate thesis projects in foreign language education programs. Her research engages with critical and practice-based approaches to curriculum and evaluation in teachers' education. She is currently developing academic work on situated curriculum as a framework for strengthening locally meaningful pedagogical practices in language teacher education. Please join me in extending a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Angélica. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Benaissa, Professor Talib. Thank you to the collectivity for inviting me, for opening up this space for me to share my experiences, my visions, my realities about how to be a teacher in Colombia, with the different perspectives and the different challenges that we have. So that is why I entitled this presentation, Rethinking Language Teacher Education from the Global South, Situated Curriculum, Teacher Agency, and Context responsive assessment. Let me walk you through different elements that have shaped my teaching practice for 25, 26 years now. I have been able to discover, to encounter different elements and different circumstances of my teaching, which have led me to understand the reality of my students, of seeing my students as real producers of language, of their own language, given the fact that they already have their own cultures, their own realities, their own perspectives, their own perceptions of life and the world. This is going to be kind of a friendly presentation. I would like to present it in a very, let's say, personal view, because this is a result of my practice, of my research. I have been able to present this topic to different publics around the world and in Colombia. And they have been able to make my audience realize the importance of locating ourselves in the global south and understanding how much we have been subjected to different pressure or pressuring moments and pressuring curricula that have led us to probably perpetuate the teaching of a foreign language without realizing that we already have our own realities and our own cultures. So yes, this is my locus of enunciation, as Professor Benaissa was introducing me. I am a language teacher educator for about 26 years. I have been working at public universities in Colombia, especially in the last few years in southern Colombia. I have focused on publics related to teaching English, especially to pre-service teachers. We have had different complex institutional elements which have led us, teachers and students, to stop a little bit and think about what is expecting us from this reality. So there are different social-linguistic realities, especially in the south of Colombia, in which we can encounter multiple linguistic moments, multiple linguistic groups. We have indigenous groups, we have indigenous languages, we have Spanish as the mainstream language, but we have been able to understand that English is a foreign language to us. However, the bilingual national program has been put to us, or has been, let's say, inserted to our curriculum and to our educational system as something mandatory, but without realizing the implications of this. So we are going to analyze throughout my presentation how we can escape from this in a very, let's say, empowering way. So yes, in my country, we have multilingual realities. We have unequal institutional conditions, especially public universities. We have this terrible situation in which there is not enough funding for research, for example. Teachers are not very well paid as well. So, and students have to struggle a lot to get to university. They, for example, in my university, some of my students, they live in nearby towns, and sometimes the violence and the situations that happen with guerrillas and paramilitary, they have blocked their normal process. Sometimes there's no way to come from their towns to the university or to go home, etc. There are different situations that we need to take into consideration at the moment of teaching a class. But of course, from this, we need to see how we can respond to this in a pedagogical way, taking into consideration the local realities. So yes, this is the global south where I am, where we are. So the global south is not only, I see it not only as a geographical location, but as an epistemological position. What is my position in an ontological way, in an ontological perspective? What is my position here in this part of the world, there in that part of the world where you are? you look at the map, we are, you and I are located in the global south. And all of this has brought a history behind. All of this has been a process, a systematic process of colonization. So I started to understand that we have been colonized ever since our countries were, established as countries, as nations. We have been subjected to different hegemonic positions and different cultural invasions that we have even helped perpetuate. So of course, in my country, we have diverse student populations. As I was saying before, we have indigenous students, we have African Colombian students, we have all types of students, of all types of races, of ethnicities in a classroom. So even in some circumstances, or in many circumstances, our students are first generation university students. What does it mean? They're the first ones to enter university. That means that their parents, probably they didn't go to the university, probably they couldn't even finish their high school studies. And many of them come from rural areas. Many of them have to travel for hours in order to come to reach the university, to reach my classes. Of course, and they have multiple experiences, multiple languages. Some of my students speak minority language as their first language, and they speak Spanish as their second language. So, but in my situation as a teacher, I was even feeling bad and concerned about how much I had asked my students to forget about their own culture and impose an external culture to them. There are also institutional challenges. There are limited resources, as I was saying before, high teaching loads. We teachers, we have to cope with different elements, with a lot of hours for teaching, very few hours for preparing our classes, very few hours for accompanying our students in their process. So we are carrying a very heavy load on our shoulders. And of course, there are also administrative constraints. Sometimes the administration clashes with the teachers' willings or expectations, because there are some, there is money in between. So sometimes they don't want to hire teachers, enough teachers to cover all the necessities of the careers or the degrees. There are different circumstances. Even the governments in my country, this is the first time we have a different government, because for more than 200 years we have had extreme right governments, which, they didn't give too much attention to education. The funding for education was very little. So in this new government, which is a progressive government by Gustavo Petro, we have had some opportunities to expand our expectations, and the universities have received more funding for different missions that university teachers have. There are also curricular tensions. The problem that we have seen with my students when we analyze different elements and different documents and laws in our country, we have seen that we have been taught to replicate standardized models that were copy-pasted from abroad, models that do not have anything or much to do with our own reality. So they have told us that English is the language that we have to learn, but they have never stopped for a while to think about that we already have our own language, we already have our own culture. So it is impossible to insert a different culture to our own ideas and perspectives. That is ontologically and pedagogically serious. And also, I understood that teacher agency is something, or is a skill that we need to develop as teachers. So educators who create, who adapt, who can resist in order to respond to the realities of our context, those are the teachers who are really making change, who are really contributing to the development of education in Colombia. And probably I am thinking that as I am speaking here, probably you can see, you can relate to some of these realities of mine that I am expressing here. And of course, we will have the opportunity to discuss them later. So in order to depart to, or to deepen more into the topic, I would like you to think about these questions, and probably we can answer them at the end of this presentation. The first question is, to what extent do current models of language teacher education respond to the contexts where teachers actually teach and learn? Think about a rural school teacher. Think about an urban school teacher. Think about a teacher who has a variety of students with different problems, with different expectations. There are some students who don't even have breakfast before coming to school. They are really coming from deprived communities. Some of our students have been, displaced from their own territories because of the violence that is a real fact in my country. So think about those realities in Africa. Think about those realities in the whole South America. Think about those realities in our global South context. The second question would be, what happens when teacher education programs rely mainly on standardized curriculum and assessment frameworks developed elsewhere, as I was mentioning before? To which extent does it affect us? To which extent does it affect our students' personality, identity? So let's consider these questions in order to analyze this topic. So this conversation matters a lot today because across many regions of the Global South, language teacher education programs continue to engage with curricular and assessment models that do not always reflect on local realities. They are usually copy-pasted from somewhere else. Yeah. If you look at the common European framework for language teaching, you see that there is a framework there, yes, but most of the countries in the Global South have taken that framework as the only way to teach, as the only way to understand language teaching, or foreign language teaching in this case. So we need to reconsider, we need to rethink, and we need to ponder on these circumstances. So of course, this invites us to rethink teacher education as a contextual, dialogic, and knowledge-producing practice. During my teaching practice, I was thinking, who are my students? How am I taking my students? Are my students like a receptacle, like a recipient that just gets a lot of input? And what about producing the language, producing the knowledge? In university students, in my case, where I teach pre-service teachers, there will be teachers in the near future. I was concerned about their process in producing knowledge. They were probably replicating a lot of activities, games, and even their research products were very, let's say, superficial. But when I started working with my students in research 1 and 2, I saw that my students were kind of contaminated, if I may say it like that, with external and foreign ideas. Like English is the language that we must learn. English is the language that opens our doors to, to the future. English is. But I would, ask them to understand that we already speak a fantastic language. We already speak Spanish, which is a very rich language. Yes, we were colonized by the Spaniards. Actually, my last name comes from Castilla. But it doesn't mean that we need to copy, the cultures and the realities of other people. We have our own reality. So I always ask my students to realize and to see English as a tool. It's a vehicle to transport, cultures and realities. It is a way to understand the world. It is a way to communicate with others. So let's focus on the social and critical perspectives in applied linguistics. So recent work in social critical applied linguistics highlights different elements. The first one is that teacher education can become a space to problematize relationships between language, culture, and power. So power is a word that we need to, pay attention, close attention to. How can we see the power that external governments, external cultures have, imposed on us, even in political relations, even in governmental relations, even in economic relations. We have seen how English is the language of transaction. English is the language of computers. English is the language that, the lingua franca, right? So yes, so education can become a space to problematize those relations. The space, the language classroom can make students recognize their own socio-cultural realities. So it doesn't mean that they have to forget about their own culture, their own realities, and then insert a new language. It doesn't work like that. Because they are learning English or French. In my country, we can learn English or French as a foreign language. So they're learning those languages as foreign languages. It's different, as you know, learning a language as a foreign language than from learning a language as a second language. Second language is naturally learned or naturally acquired. So in this case, we need to focus our students on their own reality. Some of my students are already polyglots. And they didn't know until I told them, hey, you are a polyglot. How do you say that? Say, yeah, because you speak your mother tongue, which is an indigenous tongue, and then you speak Spanish as a second language, and now you are speaking English as a foreign language. So if you ask a regular Colombian about the word bilingual, the first thing that comes to their mind is English, Spanish. But when you ask your students to think about this, the dimension of the word bilingual, they start to realize that, yes, we are already bilingual. We are already bilingual. But we have, been brainwashed in understanding that bilingual only means English, Spanish. So, of course, I always try to provide spaces to my students in all my classes, in research classes, in curriculum design classes, in evaluation classes, to engage with local knowledges and territorial experiences. There is a lot to tell. There is a lot to talk about in English, about my country, about my town, about my vereda, which is like a rural zone. Yeah, there are many things that I can tell. I can use this language to tell other people about myself, about my own region, about my family. So the classroom can promote context-responsive pedagogical practices. So whenever we plan a class with my practicum students, we think about the context. We think about where we are going. What is the reality and what are the necessities of those students I'm going to intervene? What are the needs they have? Our students from basic school, they don't learn good English. They need to learn English, but the English classes are not good enough because the teachers are not well prepared. So that is a reality. So whenever they, reach those students, they need to understand and they need to realize what they are really facing. There are some students with different violent situations from home. Yeah, they have a lot of situations that they reflect in the classroom. So the classroom should become a space to practice in a pedagogical manner, but also in a humanistic manner. So there are many authors like Pandino Parra, Núñez Pardo, who have devoted their research to this. These are actual photographs of my students, my practicum students, and some of my co-workers. So where does situated, or this idea of situated curriculum emerge from? Of course, as I was saying at the beginning, it emerges from everyday teacher education practice in public universities in Colombia. Those are the results of my research and my reflection throughout these years. And I have noticed tensions between standardized curricular expectations, what the government expects from us. There are student realities. I mean, there is this tension between this and student realities as well, diverse student realities. In my classroom, I can have 2 or 3 indigenous students, 3, 4, 5 Afro-Colombian students. Many of them can be, peasant students coming from the rural area. So I have different elements in a classroom. So I cannot neglect, or I should not neglect, that reality because I am teaching a foreign language. So of course, as I was mentioning, there are also institutional constraints and locally meaningful pedagogical decisions that we need to make. But what do I mean by a situated curriculum? So situated curriculum understands teacher education as context responsive, dialogic, socially grounded, and shaped by teachers' pedagogical agency. So it is not the language what shapes my teaching. It is me, myself, as the teacher who leads the pedagogical practice that I am using, my praxis as itself. So it is not the language that leads my teaching. It is me who leads the teaching. What do my students need? It is also a result of negotiating with my students, recognizing their identities, recognizing their realities. So that is situated curriculum. I explain to my students this concept of situating curriculum in a simple way. It's just standing yourself in the real context where you are. If you are an Afro-Colombian student, you have some realities that you need to understand and realize before going to teach. If you're a peasant student coming from a different rural area, or probably you have been displaced due to violence, that is a reality that you need to understand and realize before teaching. So it recognizes curriculum not only as a fixed or premeditated structure, but as a negotiated pedagogical process. Every classroom is different. This is a cliche phrase, but it is true. Every classroom is different. Every classroom has their own constraints, their own necessities, their own expectations. So we depart from that in order to understand situated curriculum. So how do we approach this situated curriculum practice? So in teacher education classroom, this involves connecting pedagogical decisions with local educational realities. Look at the expression that I'm using here, pedagogical decisions. It is not pedagogical copy-pasted decisions. It is pedagogical decisions that I make thanks to my teacher agency in my classroom with my students. We negotiate the different decisions that we make. Designing context-responsive learning tasks. I was talking with Professor Al-Taleb before this presentation, and we were wondering how far we are going with this new generation and with this new advance in technology. So the idea here is to see our students as that generation that is modern, that generation that is innovative, that generation that is very smart as well. So I cannot propose something to my students which they will see as something imposed. Whenever you try to impose something to your students because you have the power of being the teacher, you will probably find resistance because that is something that is not of their interest. But when you negotiate that knowledge with them, when you ask them what they really need, so that becomes more dialogical and that becomes more context responsive. So encouraging reflective engagement with territory and community is essential, and recognizing student teachers as knowledge producing agents is also essential. Remember at the beginning I was saying, how did I perceive my students? When I started to perceive my students not as recipients or receptacles of knowledge, but as producers of knowledge, as agents of knowledge producing. So in this way, the idea of teaching changes. It switches to something more academic and more pedagogical and more real. So situated curriculum is, yes, a dialogic framework. The idea of this situated curriculum resonates with perspectives that understand curriculum as socially constructed curriculum or socially constructed elements grounded in teachers' experiential knowledge. I mean, my knowledge counts a lot. My experience counts all the time. So it is not something preconceived or something that I copy from somewhere else. It's my reality and the way I perceive the world. It is also shaped through teacher agency. It is also situated within teacher learning processes, and it is informed by Latin American perspectives on context-responsive teacher education. So let me tell you that I'm not the only teacher who has been thinking about this. There are many teachers, many colleagues who have asked themselves the same questions that I'm asking here to you, and they have decided to resist, and they have decided to make or to take action about it. They have decided to work in a different way, in a responsive way, in a resistant way. So I approach situated curriculum not as a predefined model, but as a pedagogical response emerging from these traditions and from teacher education practice in the Global South. So teacher agency in language education is understood as a central element in curriculum development and pedagogical decision-making. So teachers are curriculum makers. So whenever I start or I take a new class, I start working on my curriculum. How do I design this curriculum? How do I work with my students? I cannot have the same ideas, practices, activities, and etc. with the same students in the following semester, or with the same course in the following semester. The students change every semester, so I cannot work with the same materials with the following students of the next semester. It is impossible. I never do that because I know that I can make my own curriculum, and my curriculum needs to be responsive to my students' reality. According to Presley, Biesta, and Robinson, agency is an ecological and relational achievement. You know that Colombia is a diverse country. We have a lot of, biodiverse elements in our, different regions. We have a lot of different types of weather. So we need to be aware of that situation as well. So teacher learning is socially mediated as a professional practice. You cannot neglect social circumstances of your students at the moment of teaching. An agency is shaped by institutional and contextual conditions, according to Biesta and Robinson. So I perceive and I integrate teacher agency not simply as individual autonomy, but as a capacity to make pedagogical decisions within complex institutional, sociocultural conditions. It is really complex. I need to be aware of all those circumstances, all those elements before planning my lessons. It is not easy. Sometimes it is time consuming, sometimes it is very stressful. I also need to cope with different personal circumstances. I am a researcher, so I have to be aware of different activities in other cities or virtual activities, etc. I need to be working and playing with all those elements because I want to explore all my dimensions as a teacher. So context responsive assessment emerges when teachers exercise agency in interpreting curriculum within their institutional realities. So why am I talking about assessment? Assessment is probably the core element in our classes. We need to be aware of assessing our students all the time, from day one to day, to the last day. So assessment is a situated pedagogical practice as well, according to Scarino and other authors. It is a situated pedagogical practice. Of course, there are some standard elements that we need to consider. Yes, we need to grade our students, yes, but we also need to evaluate them, to assess them in different elements and in different areas in which they develop themselves. So assessment is part of teacher learning and professional decision-making, according to Johnson. So yes, we make decisions at the moment of creating or establishing our evaluation system. So evaluation is shaped by contextual and ethical considerations. It is, sometimes it is surprising to see how we teachers can even oppress our students, God forbid, with evaluation, with a test. Oh, you were not paying attention to me, so take a piece of paper and write your name. I'm going to quiz you on this topic. I mean, sometimes we see evaluation as something to eject our own power. And that is something really, really wrong. That is something that we shouldn't be doing. Evaluation should be seen by both teachers and students as a process and as an opportunity to, of course, to introspect our own learning and to understand why am I missing and why am I doing right in order to continue or in order to stop a little bit and make decisions about it. So assessment goes beyond technical standardized measurement toward educational meaning making. So from this perspective, assessment is not only a mechanism for measuring learning, but a pedagogical space where teachers interpret curriculum in context. So based upon the way I am evaluating, I'm assessing my students, I need to adapt my own curriculum. I need to adapt my own teaching. I need to adapt the way I'm evaluating my students. I need to prepare my students for the tests. Of course, I need to test them. I need to test their language knowledge, but I also need to prepare them for that. I also need to ask them to be ready for that. I need to develop different activities and techniques in them so that they can be ready for the tests. And of course, they need to know that when they produce language, when they produce a podcast, when they produce an oral presentation, when they produce a written text, it's something that needs to be evaluated, something that needs to be scrutinized just to see how they are doing. And this is part of their own process. And they can be, they are able to also evaluate themselves and co-evaluate their partners. Yesterday, I did an exercise based on this co-evaluation, and it was really meaningful for my students. They had produced some podcasts, and I asked, under a rubric, I asked the partners to evaluate their partners as well. So it was really interesting. They were listening to their own partners' productions, and they were evaluating how they did. And that is something natural, something normal that we should be able to do every day. So why am I inviting you to do this, to rethink teacher education from the Global South? I'm inviting you to think about this because we need to recognize teachers as knowledge producers. We need to value the context as a source of pedagogical insight. We need to expand curriculum beyond standardized models, imposed models. And we need to understand assessment as a dialogic educational practice as well. So rethinking language teacher education from the Global South invites us to continue building context-responsive pedagogical conversations together and to look forward to continuing this dialogue all the time, hopefully with this fantastic group that I have just recently joined, and I'm really glad I have joined you guys. So thank you very much. I don't want to extend more my presentation. I was really happy, and I am really happy to be here and to share with you my insights and my experience as a teacher. So the Global South is not only a site of implementation, but it is a space of pedagogical knowledge production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angélica, for this magnificent lecture, which took us into different details concerning the topic of rethinking language teacher education from the Global South, situated the curriculum, teacher agency, and context responsive assessment. It has been an honor to listen to you talking about this topic and giving us a lot of details, as well as sharing your experience in designing curriculum at Colombia. Now let's just move on to questions. All right, Dr. Ahmed, can you start with the question?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Angélica, for your presentation. We enjoyed listening to you, and we enjoyed being with you in this journey that you have been sharing with us today. And we were happy to have you among us and as a member within Bitlisaniyat Academy. So you have introduced the concept of situated curriculum. In practical terms, what does the process of designing and implementing a situated curriculum look like? Or how can teachers, a teacher or teacher educators, be it this work is their own context, particularly from facing institutional pressures to adhere to standardized or national frameworks. For example, in Morocco, we have a reform and we have new textbooks that are supposed to be based on the UDL, the Universal Language Design, and also the European framework. Also the global citizenship. So we have several principles that should be included in our textbooks. And as you know, each country has its specific cultural, social, political, and economic status. So how could teachers practice this or implement this situated curriculum?
Fortunately enough, as I was saying in my presentation, I've had the experience of working in public universities in the public context, which is more flexible. But I also had the experience to work in private institutions, in private universities, where we have the same reality that you are presenting here. So what I used to do was I would take the textbook that I had to follow, yes, I had to follow it, but I would adapt little things, little elements in my classes. For example, I had to teach the weather. That was the topic in order to teach, present simple, what are you wearing? What do you wear every day to go to school, for example? So I would take the function of the language, which is the simple present expressions, and I would make a little tweak to my topic. So let's say, yes, I have to teach the 4 seasons, but in Colombia, we don't have the 4 seasons. This is a tropical weather we have here. So how can I teach the 4 seasons if my students are not familiarized with the 4 seasons? Yeah. So what I would do is I would take this 4 seasons topic as something interesting for them from other countries. You see, in Europe, they have different seasons. What about Colombia? What about your city? Is it raining today? What is the weather like today in Colombia? So I would open Google Maps, for example, and I would start exploring with them different elements. So we don't need to detach from the standard, but in our classes, we can make those little tweaks in order to make our students realize that English can be practical for them. Because if we continue working only on the textbook, it becomes boring, the class becomes really boring and dull, and at the same time, students don't feel familiarized with the language. But when you ask your students, what is the weather like in your vereda, in your pueblo, in your town? It's different from them because in here, for example, in Cauca, which is the region where I study and work and live, we have different, weather types. If here in my town it is sunny, probably in the mountains it is raining a lot. Yeah. So when my students travel from their town to university, it was raining a lot in my town, but here it is sunny. So you see, we have all those differences. So that is what makes the difference as well. Okay. Realizing the conditions and the realities of our students and seeing the other cultures as something to explore, something interesting to explore. Hey, let's look at this. How about this? Have you ever seen snow? And probably you will see one of your students saying, yes, because I live up on the mountains and we have snow there. Because in Colombia, we also have snow, on the mountains, on the peaks of the mountains. So probably they have that experience. So take advantage of the realities of your students without detaching from, of course, from the standards, but try to make your classes more meaningful through realizing the real context of your students.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Angélica, for you mentioned that, or you mean that as educators, we need to localize the knowledge and to try to use these authentic situations in which students can practice language. And as educators, we can concentrate on what students can do with the language that they are learning. Thank you so much.
I think, thank you so much, Dr. Angélica. I think here you are mentioning a very important key in applied linguistics, and especially in language teaching, which is aligning what we have in the standard curriculum with what we need in reality. And during your lecture, you talked about needs analysis, which is a very important feature in designing curriculum and designing syllabus. Especially, as I said, in teaching languages. So needs analysis is very important in order to see what is going on and see what our students need. And of course, I can relate with the beginning of your lecture when you talked about the circumstances, the students coming from different backgrounds, different cultures, speaking different languages, being first generation university students, being the first one, in other words, being the first one in their families to go to the university. And here's another question from Professor Ahmed Mertou. He's also a member of the Bitlisaniyat. He says, are there any urgencies to adapt and adopt new ways of assessment and evaluation in this era of AI by going beyond traditional ways?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question, Dr. Ahmed. Yes. I was conversing with you before the presentation, and we were talking about this response that we need to give to our students' necessities and realities of using artificial intelligence. I use artificial intelligence in my classes. I ask my students to use it responsibly, ethically. So in my writing sessions, for example, I ask my students to compare, their writings to AI generating writings. For example, they copy paste their writings, and the AI is a very good tool to help them improve their writings. That is one way. So we cannot forget about artificial intelligence. We cannot forget that our students have this, special chip that is, even faster than us. They know a lot about technology more than even us. So we cannot neglect this. And of course, talking about students' needs, we also need to understand that our students are, have been affected, especially after the pandemic. They have been highly affected by the huge influence of internet and, scrolling all the time. They are distracted all the time, almost all the time. So we need to understand that point as well. So we need to plan activities which demands not too much concentration from them. We need to switch activities every 20 minutes, depending on the ages. Before, when 20, almost 30 years ago, when I started teaching, it was, more relaxing to be a teacher because you would plan one or two activities and your students would focus and concentrate all along. But nowadays, I have noticed that my students do not concentrate that much. I need to be changing or switching, activities every now and then. So that is something that is part of our own reality, and we cannot escape from it. So we need to adapt our own classes to that reality of our students. Artificial intelligence is something that is there. For example, with my students in practicum classes, we use AI to generate their lesson plans as well. So that is really interesting and really useful tool. It saves time, and it is really fun as well to use it, because sometimes we're running out of time. They don't have much time to plan, so they can, give this, the specific prompt to their intelligence, and they can, it helps them a lot with their teaching planning.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's indeed very important for teachers in this generation to use AI and to rely on it a lot in order to generate different activities that will help in the class. Here is another question. How might a situated curriculum improve students' engagement compared to a one-size-fits-all international textbook?
When you are forced, given the institutional policies, to work with a textbook, as I was saying before, you should not neglect it. You need to work with it because it's part of your, your contract. You signed up a contract and you need to follow the rules. But the way to respond to this reality is where you put into practice your agency as a teacher. You have the power in your classroom. Of course, you need to do it. You need to execute it in a good way. Of course, negotiating with your students, negotiating knowledge with them, asking them how much they want to learn about this. Sometimes I ask my students, for example, yesterday we were negotiating an exam. I wanted them to produce orally something for the final exams. And I asked them, how would you like me to evaluate you on this, on the oral production? So they didn't come up with many ideas, but I asked them, how about making a podcast? Or how about making, let's say, a tutorial video to explain some topics to me? 5 minutes, you will be, talking on a video, you will be using different slides, you will be using technology, artificial intelligence to produce the slides, etc. And, you put everything, at the same time into one oral production. So yes, we need to balance. We need to work and leverage our own, situation as teachers in a specific, condition or a specific institution. But at the same time, we need to make our students realize that they can work in different ways. They can use different tools to be evaluated. So we need to erase that idea that evaluation only means testing. Evaluation doesn't mean only testing. Evaluation means understanding and assessing your students' production. So working with textbooks, coming back to the question, working with textbooks can be really meaningful when you do it well, when you don't attach yourself all the time to the textbook. Try to make some changes to the topics, as I was mentioning before, and in that way your students will be more responsive to that and will relate more to your proposals.
Indeed, it is. I have a question myself, and as someone who worked in curriculum design and who has some kind of modest experience in this field, I usually find it difficult to design curriculums or design syllabus for a group of students who have diversity in terms of their level in language. So if we check frameworks like the Common European Framework of References or the ACT, the American one, we find that there are a lot of levels, and when we go deeper into these language levels, we find out that some levels cannot be mixed or put within the same group or put within the same class, because it will be a little bit difficult to teach them the same thing, where one of the students knows it, masters it, while the other one doesn't know much about the same content. So how do you manage diversity in relation to language levels when designing situated curriculum?
Actually, we teachers in Colombia, in the Colombian setting, we have this situation all the time. Whenever we receive a group of students in first semester, they are supposed to be in at least A2 or B1 level of English, but it doesn't happen. It seldom happens. Some students have the advantage of having taken some sessions or classes in institutions or private institutions because their parents can afford it. But most of our students, they don't have the level, the expected level. in first or second semesters. So what I usually do is talk with my students, make them realize about the situation and start making decisions. So I had this situation with a group of students this semester, this term, and what we did was take those students who have the most difficulties for some reinforcement sessions that the university or the program offers. So I propose the situation or the solution to them, and they accepted it. They said, yes, Professor Angélica, we need it. We need to, level up with my other partners. It's okay for them to realize, to understand that they need to level up. And those students who are, in the expected level, they can help you out with them. So when I group them, when I pair them to work together, I ask them to help each other. So if the situation is too serious, you can take them to special, classes or reinforcement classes or something like that. But when the situation is not that serious, you can do different activities that help your students understand that they need to produce more. In my case, my students don't have very good fluency. They don't want to speak with me. They don't want to speak in class. So I propose different activities to them to make them speak, but I always talk to them. I mean, you need to establish this bond with them and this confidence with them so that they can communicate to you whenever they feel uncomfortable, whenever they don't feel okay to speak, or if they have some special needs. There are some students who can't see very well, for example, when I write on the board, so I have to write big or whatever. So, I mean, there are different elements that I cannot tell you there is a standard thing to do. It's was just what you were saying before. It's a needs analysis thing that you have to do. And if the analysis that you understood was that students have different levels, there are different decisions that you can make. I usually do also research with them. So what I do is I tell them, okay, I would like to do some research with you. I would like you to help me with this. And I start working on, for example, pre-tests, interventions like action research, and then we see the results together and they start realizing that they were parts of this process. So it is a dialogical thing. I cannot give you like a formula, but it's something dialogical and human, that you need to do.
Yeah, great. I have the same problem with my students right now this year in high school. It's classes where we find classes of the same level in high school where we find different stages of language, of English language. Some of them, when I first did the diagnostic test, and they tried to do also a placement test, they found out that some students are novice mid or novice high according to the ACTFL. And I have around 3 or 4 students who have shown that they have advanced level in English, very advanced level. They speak very fluent English, they are very good, but having the same 2 levels in the same class is a difficulty, because if the content that we are teaching is below the level, then it causes boredom in the class. If it's above the level, then it causes also boredom. So we have to align that with what Krashen calls input plus 1, which is the level of the students plus some kind of challenging in order to achieve learning. It's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. Yeah. Let's move on to Dr. Ahmed. He has another question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Abdeslam. Dr. Angélica, you have been discussing this idea of using artificial intelligence, and Mr. Abdeslam have mentioned some obstacles that in-service teachers or educators face. So, and you spoke about teachers' agency. What are the most common barriers, whether institutional or cultural or material, that constrain teachers' agency in the global South? And what strategies have you observed or implemented that effectively nurture and sustain this agency among pre-service teachers and in-service teachers?
Working with pre-service teachers have has been really enriching and has been really challenging. Whenever we start designing our lessons, we have some agreements with different institutions, schools, and universities in town. And we have been allowed to enter those institutions to do some micro teaching there. Yeah. But the main constraint here is access to materials, access to internet. There are some schools, or well, many schools, which don't even have a TV set. They don't have a projector. They don't have access to internet. So my students start asking me, what should I do? So sometimes combining old-fashioned techniques of making the flashcards and, using magazines and slides, paper-based slides, it works a lot. So that was one solution that we found. Another constraint, it has to do with the classroom environment. The classes here are packed. You can find classrooms with 40 students. The minimum amount is 35 students. So when our pre-service teachers go there and face that reality, I have seen them, how nervous they get. But I always tell them, just take it easy, relax, and do not start yelling at the children. Do not start, getting so mad that you lose control. There are many situations that we need to understand and realize. Colombia is, unfortunately, a very violent country. We have had this history of violence and clashes between the government and, armed groups that have transcended to our own cultural behavior. So you see children responding aggressively to teachers or to practicum teachers. There are many circumstances that make us realize if we really want to be teachers or not. I always tell my students, my pre-service teachers, are you really willing to do this? Would you like to do something else? I don't know, be a cook or something different, which a job that you don't have to deal with a lot of people. So, but when they meet this reality with their own willing to give solutions and to contribute to our society, that is when magic happens. So yes, we have a lot of problems. Yes, teachers are underpaid. Yes, but the willing to help, the willing to serve those children, I think is more powerful than anything else. So when you ask me about constraints, there are many constraints. There are many situations. In rural areas, for example, there are some teachers who have been taken out of schools to be, even killed or, kidnapped. We have different situations, which, makes teaching a high-risk job here in Colombia. So, despite of those circumstances, we want to be here. We want to be teachers, and we want to continue contributing to our beautiful country.
Yeah. Thank you for your enriching and rational, insightful idea that you shared with us. Said Islam, I think you have another question from Ahmed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Professor Angélica, I have here a question from Dr. Mertu, Professor Mertu. Do you think we need a kind of English for specific purposes within the general English curriculum in order to cater for their current, which means students' current needs and target situation needs?
We hopefully, I have this is like a dream I have, and I know that many colleagues also have this dream of having this special curriculum for our context, for our realities. We have been discussing with different teachers and professionals in language teaching. We have been discussing how can we propose something to the government in order for them to understand that Colombia is a multicultural country, is a multilingual country. So before we had this bilingual national program, Programa Nacional de Bilingüismo, understood as English and Spanish as the bilingual, thing. But after a lot of time and after a lot of, research by many of our colleagues, we have realized that we do need a special curriculum for our own settings. We cannot make a standard curriculum for Colombia because every region has their different realities. So we shouldn't be thinking about a special curriculum for Colombia, but we should be thinking about like let's say an umbrella curriculum, and then each region and each university and each school should be adapting their own curricula to those realities. So that would be like a dream, for us. Instead of copy pasting foreign, curricula from other countries, even in North America. If I have, attended some talks by some experts in North America, and there is one who is Native American, and she was talking to us about the necessity of thinking about their own heritage before learning English as a second language. In their case, it's English as a second language. So as Native Americans, they also have their own necessities. They have been exterminated from most of the country. They have their own realities, even in the, in the North. So here in our countries, we do need to be responsive to those necessities. And that would be fantastic to have a special curriculum for each region.
That's great, Professor Angélica. One more question, and then we call it a day. While designing curriculums, English language curriculums, how do you maintain the importance of teaching language for communication, not teaching language for other purposes in teaching general English? Because there is this dichotomy, especially when I'm trying to compare what I see or what I learn about teaching English within the world and what we do here in Morocco. There is this dichotomy of teaching about the language and teaching the language. Teaching the language is teaching it for communication, while teaching about the language is trying to learn, I don't know, the rules, the grammar, how does this end, how do you describe passive voice, how do you describe that, but then communication is not there. So how do you maintain the importance of teaching the language, not about the language?
The key here is to design your classes using the grammar as a function, not as the structure itself. For example, if you want to teach the simple present, in the objectives, do not say students will be able to make sentences in the simple present. If your objectives are like this, you will fail. Because if you ask your students to go to the grammar, to go to the structure, instead of going to the use of that grammar as a function to communicate, there is a big difference. Yeah. So whenever we plan classes with practicum teachers, pre-service teachers, I always make them realize about their objectives. So I tell them, hey, it was, a traditional thing in Colombia. Whenever you enter an English class, your teacher would say to you, okay, children, today we're going to learn verb to be. So children will go like, and I myself was like, verb to be, and what is that for? But if I start teaching, for example, my students, hey, look at this phrase. Oh, I am happy. Oh, I am sad. Oh, he is, bored, whatever. So if you start teaching descriptions instead of verb to be, it works better. So the way you approach, even from the objective, it is the way that your classes will be successful and your students will go to the point where you want them to go. which is using the language to communicate. If you ask your students to understand the grammar before, producing it, it is not really going to be helpful for them. It is more helpful for them if you ask them, for example, okay, what do you do in the morning? What is your routine? Okay, that is simple present. And then after that, they will elicit the grammar from the real context. There are even new teaching methods like inductive method, grammar inductive method, which is very, useful. And you can take those, elements from there to, to make your students understand the language, any language, French or any language, or Arabic, into producing the language from the reality, from the real context. I have an ex-student of mine who works at a rural area, a coffee region area. And he started teaching his students, for example, the colors, using or looking at the coffee leaves, the coffee tree leaves. There are different, shades of green in the leaves and in the fruits, in the coffee, fruits, the grains. So he started, contextualizing the colors and the weather and the clothing or routines from their own students' reality. So a daily routine at the finca, at the, farm. Yeah. So they started, working like that. So to respond your question, think about grammar not as the, as the structure, but as the function of the grammar. What is it for? What is the use of it? And that would be really good for you.
All right, that's great. Dr. Ahmed. All right, so we have another question. I'm very sorry. So the topic is very important, and your lecture was very amazing. You shed light on different things. I'll be actually summarizing or talking about the axis that you talked about. So here is another question. We have to
okay.
How would a language lesson on family or work look different in situated curriculum in the Global South compared to a standard European framework, SEFR lesson?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know your country. I have just read about your country, and I have met a lot of people from your country, which I find is amazing and fantastic and has a lot of history. Yeah. It's even older, a lot older than English, so, and French. So if you are contextualized in that location, so ask yourselves, what are the cultural elements that surround my students? What are those cultural elements? So if I want to teach my students about different jobs, yeah, so think about the vendor on the street. I don't know, I imagine that there are people selling, fruits or, I don't know, juice. We have different fruits in Colombia. We have all types of fruits in Colombia. I don't know how many types of fruits you have in your country, depending on the season, I guess. So think about those elements and depart from there, depart from that reality. Ask your students what their parents do. What does your daddy do? Oh, he owns a shop. He sells coffee on the street, or he sells, or he works at a company, or he is a teacher, whatever. So ask your students about those realities, and from there you start departing and distributing your own teaching to your students. The other one was work on, I don't know the other one, I forgot the other one from the question. So the topics that are supposed to be taught from the curriculum, departing from the Common European Framework thing, remember that the Common European Framework is just a framework. It's just a basis for you to direct your teaching. If you read it well, it doesn't say that you have to teach European culture. It doesn't say that. It is a Common European Framework, yes, but we happen to adapt it or to adopt it from them to us. So when there is something in one of the documents of the Common European Framework that says that we should adapt those elements to, to our own countries, to our own setting. So that is what we should be doing. The mistake was that we copy pasted without realizing the realities of our own countries, of our own contexts. So if I want to teach, for example, my students the colors, so let's start with the colors that they wear every day, with the colors that represent the country, for example, your flag. I see that you have red, you have, I think, some yellow or something. So let's make them realizable, those elements that are present there for them. And then after that, after you make sure that they have incorporated their own things and their own realities to the language, then you can start teaching about other cultures, because other cultures are important. Other cultures are interesting, you know? So that is like the key. The key is to understand that we are located in a special and a specific region, and we need to depart from that reality.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angélica. It has been a very important lecture. You talked about rethinking language teacher education from global South perspective, situated curriculum as a framework for context responsive teacher education, teacher agency in shaping locally meaningful pedagogical practices, moving beyond standardized evaluation, context perspectives assessment approaches, and also implications for equity, epistemic diversity, and the future of language education. It has been a pleasure to talk to you and discuss with you, ask questions and exchange opinions about this topic. Thank you so much. Dr. Benaissa, do you have any final words?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Abdeslam, for your engaging questions, and thanks to Dr. Angélica. On behalf of our attendees, I wish to express our sincere appreciation to Dr. Angélica, and for delivering this essential lecture. Your discourse has demonstrated that rethinking language teacher education from the global South is not merely an act of adaptation, but a profound intellectual and ethical project that we all as educators and researchers should engage in. We extend our special gratitude to our supervisors and the coordinators as well, and technical staff, for facilitating organizing such lectures and scientific gatherings. Also, let us thank all the attendees who engaged with us and shared their questions within the chat box in YouTube, and also all those who didn't stop just texting us in WhatsApp. There are the lecture also raised a lot of questions that practitioners should think about and try to implement. Thank you for your great and rational, insightful ideas. Thank you, Sayyid Salam.
Thank you so much, Dr. Benaissa. Dr. Angélica, any final words?
I just want to express words of appreciation, of thankfulness to you, to Professor Hmad, to Professor Taleb, for allowing me to share my experience with you. And, you know, my humble experience. I'm not an expert at this. I'm just a teacher who has struggled a lot to survive in this reality. But I wanted to share this because I know that these realities resonate with your own realities. I know that most of what I have said, or if not to say, thank you, Sabar Farah. You know, everything that I have mentioned, I know that it resonates with your own understanding and with your own process as teachers. I know that most of you are, you know, having different realities in your own classes, in your own universities or schools. And I hope that these words and that this shared experience works for you. And probably we can make another talk in the near future. Probably we can produce some writings or some, you know, publications together. I don't know. There can be many things that we can do together. Inshallah, I hope to continue working with you and sharing with you for a long time. Inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Angélica. Personally, I would like to extend my gratitude and heartfelt thanks to everyone who is following us from different parts of the world and from to the team of the Bitlisaniyat. Thank you so much, and see you in the next lecture, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.